Okay, bow drill practice. Um, Natural handhold, fireboard made out of cedar, spindle made out of cedar, bow, which is made out of a palm frond stem, and I just took off the sharp edges on the side, rounded it out. It's about the same length from my armpit to my fingertips, and that's kind of the size that you're looking for in a bow. You don't want it too short because then you're doing the short stroke stuff. So I want it that long. That way, when I start my bow, I could get these nice long sawing motions, which create a lot more speed and a lot more rotations on that spindle with a lot less work from me. So you don't want a short spindle. You don't want a heavy spindle. You don't want a spindle that's too long where the tip of it is weighing down and fighting you because it keeps bumping into the ground and everything like that. So think armpit to fingertips. Think something light. Doesn't have to be dead. It could be green. Just not too green to where it has a bunch of flex, because then your string will slip a lot. You can't keep tension on your string, so you don't want it to be too dead. I like to use more of the drier stuff. For the fireboards, when I just carved this out of cedar with a knife, I could have carved it with a stone tool, would have been just fine. It would have took a lot longer, time and energy. To make natural fireboards though, out of what you find in the wild, when you carve them up, they're not gonna look this pretty unless you have a knife. If you didn't have a knife, you would be taking like an old dead stick that you see on the ground that's pretty soft, and you're gonna just drive your thumbnail into it and see if it leaves an impression. If it does, I'm gonna whack that stick across a tree and it's gonna break in half. It won't break clean. Normally one part lifts up a little bit, and then you have something like this where this part may be removed, but then the rest back here will still be circular, but at this part it's going to kind of splinter off, and you're going to get to the center of that wood, and that's where all the dry wood is. It's in the center. So when you're carving your own sets out of nature, wood that's found in nature, you want the dry stuff, the real dry stuff, and that's normally going to be in the center of the wood. So I'm going to have to find a way to split that wood to get to the center. And again, you don't need a board this big. Technically, all I need is this. So when I hit that log on the tree and it bends and splits and lifts up, I'm going to have about that much space that's going to be my actual fireboard. Then I would just step on the rest of that small log and use that portion as my actual fireboard. So that's how you would make one of these out of nature. Spindle, you're going to try to get out of the same kind of wood. And again, if I didn't have a knife, I would break that on the tree until it kind of splinters up until I find a piece my size. A lot of times they're going to be circular already, so it's really just getting it to break into the size that I want. I may have to rub it on a rock like so, like this, until I could actually shape it up the way that I want. I'll rub it on the rock to get the tip on this part. I'll rub it on the rock to get the eraser part on this part, or I will use the actual rock and use stone tools like this. But if I can't find stone tools, I'll just use fixed rocks and move my tool around the rock instead of the rock around my tool, or the stone around my tool. For the handhold, you're looking for something hard, so it's not going to be the same type of wood that you're using for your fireboards that is very soft wood. Here I'm going to want something very hard. And it could be anything. It could be a log like this size or whatever, and I just hold it. Doesn't really matter what it is. It just needs to be hard. Sometimes you even find rocks that have little depressions and holes in them, and that stuff works great too as a natural handhold. This is, to me, one of the toughest pieces about this bow drill fire method is finding a good handhold. Because this is how you're going to measure speed and downward pressure, and that's the key to this stuff. So having a good handhold does kind of help a lot. And a lot of the aftermarket handholds or the bow drill divots and the knife handles, things like that, are great because they save a lot of time and energy. That's one whole piece that I don't have to get now, and it's a very important piece. When you use natural handholds like this, they really wear down the spindle. So you're starting with a spindle this big, but if you keep making mistakes, that spindle's going to get real small real quick. Then everything gets harder. Plus, you have to create a new little divot every time you start a new blow drill, right? Like I have to do one divot for the burn-in, one divot for the actual fire. So that's 1 fire, 2 fire, and this now is going to be 3 fires out of this handhold. So you go through these pretty quick too. But again, you should be only starting 1 blow drill fire out there, and then your job is to keep that fire going and don't let it die out. Also, while you have it going, you want to think about next fire and try to find ways to be creative and make your next fire easier, such as char cloth and things like that. Or charred punk wood, or whatever. Certain mushrooms were good for that too. Tree fungus, things like this. So back to bow drill. So what I did is I already burned in my hole, and I burned in my hole the same way you would actually start the fire. So it could be a flat surface here. I get my knife, because this time we're doing it with a knife. If I didn't have a knife, I would use a stone tool, and I would just create an impression in the wood. Then I would sharpen up my tip, check my back piece, place the spindle into the string, put it in that divot, put my handhold on top, step on the fireboard close to the hole. Don't step too far away from the hole. I want to keep it as still as possible, so I want my foot right next to that hole. Right? Then I don't want my knee to be in the way every time I saw, so I kick my knee back to where it's lined up with my lead heel, my front heel, to my back knee. That should be in line, so that way I have a clear path to work this without anything getting in the way. Another thing too is I see people sit back on this thing, and then this is away from their leg, and they're just shouldering it and trying to hold it, and that's exhausting. That's hard. You're gonna have not a high success rate with something like that. So dip your knee forward, lock your wrist, the curved part of your wrist. You want to lock that against your knee or the front of your kneecap, and then just lean forward. So all my weight is over the fireboard right now. So to apply downward pressure, that's very easy because I'm using my body and not my arm. But when I first start this thing, especially when I'm burning in, I don't want any downward pressure at all, right? It's all about speed at that point. So here, I'll burn in this hole. I wasn't gonna burn in a new hole because I have 2 holes here already prepped, but I'll burn in the hole so you can see. So if I'm gonna burn in this hole, I gotta put more of a tip on the spindle. Just make sure they line up and marry. So need to make that a little bit bigger, this a little bit sharper. Okay, just get them to marry together. Okay, now that's kind of spinning in there good. So now I'll actually string it up and burn in that hole. So again, right now, I just want speed, nice long strokes. There's really not much downward pressure at all. So I'm just going speed. And start real slow. Just get the motion of the bow going. Then later, you could pick up speed a little bit. And start to add a little bit more downward pressure now that I have some smoke. But again, not too much because I'm not trying to start the fire here. Right, not at this part. I'm just burning in the hole. So I should be able to do this with ease. Okay. Alright, so that's burned in. I have some sawdust here. I'm going to use that in my tinder bundle. And this is a tinder bundle. I didn't find this. I carved this, right? So with the tinder bundles, you want to have this stuff be very dry, very thin, very fibrous, right? I don't want real thick stuff in there because it's just going to kill my coal, right? I want things very thin. So what I did is I made a bunch of shavings that are pretty thick. Then I made, let's see if I could pick some out here, some shavings that are even thinner, very thin shavings, right? And I just kind of balled that up all together. Then, using the spine of my knife, you can use your actual knife, but you can roll the bevel and then you gotta fix that. So it's no big deal, but in an emergency situation I would. But here, so I just used the spine of my knife to create all these shavings, and that's kind of what I have on top. So I have a bag of them here because I just shaved a whole lot, and that's what I'm gonna put my actual coal on. You know, so that's gonna ignite first, then it's gonna start to turn into flame, and the flame's gonna catch on this thinner spiral stuff, and then it will go into these thicker shavings, you know, and then from there I could actually start putting twigs on it and create my actual fire. But remember, with fire, the rule is 98% preparation, 2% ignition. Okay, so spend most of your time on your tinder bundle. A lot of people rush the tinder bundle and they just want to actually start the fire with this, and they're so excited about this they forget the importance of that. You could get a coal, and you did all that work to get a coal, and now you have a weak coal. Even if you had a strong coal and you put it into a bundle that isn't prepped correctly, you lose it. That's a real demotivator. Okay, so take the time with this before even looking to get the ember going. So before explaining all of this process, you got to realize I was here shaving all these shavings, the thicker ones, then the thinner ones, then creating all that little fine stuff, that super fine scrapings. So this took a while. I didn't film it because it would have been boring as shit, but this is a big part of the process. Like, you can't mess up on this part. If this part's done right, you know, this whole process is a lot easier. When this is done wrong, it's going to send everything downhill real quick. So now that I burned in the hole, I have to cut my notch and then re-prep all of my equipment. For the notch, put the knife in the center, go a little bit to the left, put the knife in the center, go a little bit to the right. Those two markings is going to be where I'll cut my notch. Now, you don't want too narrow of a notch because you'll suffocate your coal, and you don't want too wide of a notch, okay? Because your spindle will just keep popping out. But if you follow that little rule that I just said, you'll be absolutely fine. So you're going to cut this notch, and you want to go as deep to where the tip of that little triangle in that V-notch is in the center of your hole, or just about the center. Okay, you want to clear up some of this stuff around the side too. That way it's smooth and the sawdust can fall and not get caught up on all those little ridges that you cut. Alright, after I cut my notch, I'm going to go back here in the bottom and just kind of hollow out that bottom a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit to create a little bit of airflow under there so my coal could breathe. That's going to make it stronger. So I'll kind of show you a close-up. That's the V-notch See, it goes into the center. Okay, that's underneath. You see, I kind of hollowed that out a little bit, so there you go. Alright, now this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They just jump right back in and they try to get it going. I have to re-prep all of my stuff. Now the flat part of my spindle has a point on it. So I need to knock that point off because I want large surface area there, and some of this wood is like polished now and I don't want that either, so I'm going to scrape some of that off. So, not taking a lot of wood away, just a very thin layer because I don't want to reshape this thing and then it won't fit in my hole correctly. Let's see, then my top part here, see that started out like a small tip, but because of applying the downward pressure, I didn't even apply that much. With the natural handholds, this is what I mean about wearing into the spindle. So now I have to take off a good amount of wood to get that sharp again. This is why you want to check your pieces each time before you get started and make sure that each piece is where it needs to be, because you can't afford to keep doing this, otherwise you won't have a spindle anymore and you're going to have to start the whole process over again, and now you'll be exhausted. Okay, so I put my point back on there, and then also I could use one of these holes, but it's going to get a lot of friction on the top real quick. I don't want that. So with these natural handholds, I now have to create yet another divot. Okay, but now I'm actually ready to get my coal. I have a little coal catch here, so it's easier to transport my coal to that tinder bundle when I'm finished. Okay, but now I could actually check my string and start this whole process over again, but this time I will get a coal, which will lead to a fire, hopefully. Okay. Step close to the hole. Tighten up on that string a little bit because it slipped. Okay. There we go. Find my new divot. Alright. Make sure my knee is in good alignment. So make sure you prep everything. Don't rush everything. Don't get frustrated. Relax. Let the pieces work for you. Okay. Lean forward. Make sure I'm in good position, but very light. Okay, I was too light. Very light downward pressure. Okay, I went too light. Demonstration. Now you're hearing squeaking because I had to reshape it a little bit, and that's what you're hearing. So, all right. See, now it's lined up with that hole. Right. So now I'm working speed, not downward pressure, just speed. Right. And I'm watching my notch. Get back in there before this cools down. I'm watching my notch fill up. It's actually almost full. My notch is almost full, so now I go a lot of downward pressure and a lot of speed. Okay, so what's happening here, why it's kicking out, is the top part was thin, but too thin, and wore out real quick. So I should have started the carving a little further back. But it's okay, I have my notch filled up. I need a new hole because it's a failed attempt. Okay, so it's good. These failures is really how you learn this stuff. When everything goes well, you don't really learn it. So right now, instead of getting frustrated, okay, just fix the problem, which was here. Create the new divot. So knock off some of these edges here. I have a small tip there, nothing too crazy, but I have a lot of that notch filled up already, which is good. So I'm going to leave that sawdust there because I almost had it. Okay. And you see I put the string close to the bottom of this thing. That's a hell of a coal because I had a lot of sawdust already, so that thing's pretty built up. That's a pretty fat coal, which is good. It's going to give me a better chance when putting it into my bird's nest. So with the bows, they don't have to be bent. A lot of people say they have to be bent. They could be straight. You just don't want your spindle rubbing against your so I leave a little more slack in the string. That way I pull away a little bit like this, so I don't keep it so close that it slows my spindle down, reduces friction. I pull it away and then go to work. Okay. So it doesn't have to be curved, it can be straight. If it's curved, you don't have to worry about that, so whatever. You do this enough times, you start to be able to break some of these little rules here. Some you can't break, some you can. So my coal's pretty strong here. I have some extra sawdust that kicked out. I sprinkle that over my coal. But my coal's been resting here and we got a good amount of breeze. So the breeze is helping my coal get stronger. And you don't have to rush this. A lot of people rush this part. You don't have to rush it. Let your coal get stronger. Right now I'm doing my last minute preparations to make sure that everything's where it needs to be. Now, a lot of these natural bird's nests, I can't exactly pick up and blow into a fire. Sometimes you can, but these are pretty thin and there's no real long pieces, so I'm actually going to do this just on the ground where it is. So now my coal's strong enough to transport, and I'm just going to drop it right on, lots of fat coal, right on the center where all those little shavings were. So right now it's sitting on top of those shavings and it's hot. So it's starting to heat up those shavings to where those shavings are now starting to become a part of that ember. So at this point we give it a little more oxygen. Let it get a lot hotter like that. See how that thinner stuff is already caught? I barely blew into that and it already caught. The reason why this one works so well, I took a lot of time prepping my tinder bundle. This is dry wood that I found in the center of dead logs, and then I just shaved it super thin and made everything a lot easier. So there you go, for all the people who did my course and learned this stuff and is probably at home practicing right now. These are some tips to help you get this done. So, hope you enjoyed it.